Do you feel this is the case in the world of the non-executives? Yes, absolutely, William. And the non-executive role, let's just think about that for a moment, because that impacts on the kind of network that you're building. Your skills are important. Yes, they're particularly important as an executive. But as a non-executive, you need to be able to articulate to your network what you bring from those skills. After all, the role of the non-executive is to advise, support, and challenge the executive. So your network's not going to want to know so much that you can go out proving that you can do the job. That's the network you build when you're the executive. But it is looking for your breadth. What are you bringing? What's your value add from all those skills that you generated and pulled together? It's much more about being able to build your network, and when you're doing that, ask for help. Now, the great thing about living and working in Scotland is that it's a fairly small network. And to that end, there's always somebody out there that's willing to help. One of the things about networking for a non-executive role is that you need to be really clear in what you're asking for. People will always give you their time. They'll always have a coffee with you. They'll always go for that beer or a glass of wine. But you don't want to spend just half an hour with somebody because they're a really nice person. Make sure that in 30 minutes you're able to say what it is that you're looking for. It might be, I have these skills from my executive career and now I'm looking to build a network to do X as a non-executive. My skills are around, it might be finance, it might be marketing, it might be general business. And I'm looking for, and here's the key, be really clear what you're looking for and what you want help with. If the person you're networking with can't help you, inevitably they'll say yes or no. If they say no, it's still an opportunity to say, could you pass me on to? And that's what you need to be doing. So yes, absolutely your network is important. People can't help you if they don't know what you're looking for. And the very worst thing, when somebody says, well, what sort of non-exec are you looking for? What sort of non-exec role? Is when you turn around and say, well, anything really. I mean, what can any of us do with that comment? Anything really? Not a lot. So even if you break it down at the highest level to say, I'm not looking for X or Y, but being able to say, are you looking for private sector? Are you looking for public sector? Are you looking for a paid role, an unpaid role? I'm really excited by, or I'm really interested in. All of those things help. So yes, do build your networks and then people can help you.
So thank you for this question about age. I don't think we have to look too far back in history to see when there were overt age biases. Historically, I think there was a favouritism for those old wise greys heads that would bring gravitas and wisdom to the board, and of course that linked to gender bias as well. So it definitely has been there, but I think over the last 10 years we have seen a real change in attitude. Both in terms of changes around equality and diversity and the importance that is given within organisations, but also around the business challenges that organisations are facing, particularly around digital and disruption, where there's a real need to look openly for different skill sets and not concentrate on a single personal characteristic. So I'm not sure age is a barrier per se, but I think there are two key things that you need to think about as a candidate in terms of age. The first one is the fact that any board may have its own biases, whether conscious or subconscious. So a conscious bias may be that the board has recognised that they are a group of men over 50 or women under 25, and that they actually want to bring in something different. And that's potentially positive in a team. The evidence base tells us that diversity of thought is what brings strength to a board. So that may even be referenced in the advert, that they're open to all candidates, but particularly looking for X, Y, and Z. So there could be that conscious positive bias. There can also be unconscious bias. So this could be a board that has a set of assumptions about what makes a good board member. This is obviously less positive if it's not been thought out, but that could be there in an individual board, even if there's not a pervasive issue. So as a candidate, what can you do about that? Well, all that I can really recommend is that you have a personal strategy about how you present your age if you think that might be relevant. So to draw on my personal experience, 10, 11 years ago, I started applying for paid roles on regulatory boards within the UK regulatory framework. I appreciated at that stage, as someone just 30, I was probably seen as young, even if not in many other contexts. And so I really actually tried to spin that as a positive. I talked about that digital challenge, about social media that was coming into professional context at that stage, and talked about how that was relevant, and tried to package that skill set and the link to bringing in someone a bit younger as a real positive. And I think that paid off for me. And in that first appointment, I was very noticeably younger than virtually all the other board members appointed. So you can turn it into a real strength. If you don't think that's quite right for the board you're pitching to, at least try and think what some of their concerns may be and think about how you target those. So I did appreciate that some of these regulatory boards might be concerned that regulation is a serious business. You're adjudicating on how markets work, potentially on whether professionals get to stay on a register, or the policy around that at least. So they want someone there with a bit of life experience. So I tried to emphasise how I would have picked some of that up through previous organisations I'd worked with that worked in a similar space, and really show I had an understanding of that level of responsibility that was there with those appointments. So the first point is really about thinking through in advance whether there might be preconceptions from the board about age, and then thinking through what is your personal strategy to target that up front. The second bit of advice I really have is not letting rumours around what boards are looking for become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So every day, particularly in my role as chair of a peer network, trying to support people onto boards, an organisation called Changing the Chemistry, I hear rumours about what boards are and aren't looking for. And sometimes I've been involved in a conversation the other side of the board table, and I know that board absolutely is looking for someone younger, or to bring on some talent from a different industry. And they're feeling that the struggle is to advertise to that market and to get them interested. But if you don't apply for a board role because you have a perception that they're not looking for someone of your age, of your gender, of your skill set, that could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You could be ensuring the appointment doesn't go to someone of that background because you've robbed them of the best candidate, which could be you. So you have to be really careful that you're out speaking to people about what the non-exec world looks like. But if you see something you like, you're not being swayed by a rumour mill that may well be wrong, or may well be ill-informed, or by people who've been very disappointed in a process and are quite understandably trying to reflect on why it maybe didn't go in their favour, but maybe haven't picked up on quite the right points. So I think the only two things I can offer around this are have a personal strategy, don't let concern about bias become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that boards are open, increasingly open to really different types of appointment, but you need to be in it to win it.
Well, I guess it depends a little bit around what's behind the question. It's not always about size, as in an unpaid role can still, with some of the public sector appointments, still be with large organisations. But if your question is primarily aimed at, I've done a traditional charity type role, a small role, but now I want to move on to something that is with a private sector or perhaps one of the paid public sector roles, my advice would be to look at the breadth. Some of the initial roles that we first take on tend to be linked to our core capabilities. So maybe you work in finance and you've been doing a non-exec role but advising on finance, or if your background is HR or marketing. And I think this question is from Judy Kerr. If your role is traditionally in an executive role, HR, and you've been doing a charitable role on an unpaid non-executive role advising on HR, begin to look at the breadth of any non-executive role. So remembering that the role of the non-executive is to advise, support and challenge the executive, and therefore we're always looking for breadth, in particular across the whole gambit of contribution in the boardroom. So I guess one of my main pointers would be possibly look to another voluntary role, but if your background is HR, perhaps look at a role where you'd be working advising on finance, or if your background, say, is law or finance, you might want to look at an area where you can develop into HR or marketing.
Medical education fits you to have a critical view of events and evidence. We rely very much on scientific analysis of problems and coming up with appropriate solutions to those problems, whether they be big issues like coronavirus or issues affecting one person. We collect information, we think about it, we analyse it, and we make a diagnosis or we suggest a solution. And above all else, we have to do that in a supportive and helpful way. And sometimes we have to do it very quickly, particularly in surgery when you're dealing with emergencies and so on. You have to make a rapid decision. And you make those decisions and you live with them. So I would think that my medical experience has made me quite a rigorous judge of information. Working with the civil service and the government for almost 10 years and as an executive director of health boards and so on, has given me a real sense of the possibilities that scientific analysis might not be the answer to the problem. You have to be able to talk to people who have a very different view from your scientific view of the world. So I think any kind of scientific education is good, but the experience of literally working in life or death with life or death issues, which are changing very rapidly, keeps you on your toes and keeps you very focused on achieving the best possible outcome in the circumstances. The second part of the question is, what would I say to my younger self if I could go back? And that's a hard one. I've always taken decisions in life on the basis of thinking hard about what the best decision is, and then I live with the consequences. And probably the biggest decision I ever took was after 15 years as a surgeon, giving that up and going back and training in public health. And at the time, my surgical colleagues thought I was raving mad. They're not laughing now, I don't think. But I thought very, very hard about it, and I took advice, and it felt like the right thing to do. And if it feels like the right thing to do, have no regrets. It's been the way I've done things. I've done things on the basis of careful consideration, and once you make up your mind, have no regrets, make the best of it and move on.